Hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and I'm definitely cooking up some onions in the background, so like pardon the sizzle. Probably not going to edit that out of the video if you can hear it at all over the background music, but I will have to be checking in on these onions every once in a while because, you know, you gotta go slow and stir a lot, that's how it works. Right, so today we're going to be talking about Shurecca, and you might note that in my last video, my Future Visions video, didn't have any details for Shurecca. And that is because while we expected that eventually we would get this data, even though it was it looked like it was going to be late, it just never showed up. I'm not sure why, but it is what it is. So I've watched a couple of videos and taken some extensive notes on what SHREK'D does. So let's start with the TMR. It's going to give you a plus shape buff with shell and single target resistance of like 20-25. We're not going to have exact numbers for this because of the lack of that wotv calc data, but we still do have a pretty good idea of what this character is like because she's very popular in JP, so there's just a lot of data on her out there anyways. Talking about her stats, or at least the way that the companion build for her was set up, because there are a number of these things that are definitely coming from her passives, but she's kind of on the slow side. Her HP is, I would say, okay, maybe kind of par. That's probably a little bit high for a mage type unit like she is, so she will be a little bit more durable than some other mages that might come to mind. But it's not like high HP or low HP, it's just okay. Her magic is very high. She also has good AoE resistance and good accuracy. Both of these things coming at least in part from her passive, but I would also wager that there's a little bit of this kind of baked into the character as well. At least when it comes to the accuracy. There's probably some on her board is what I'm getting at. She has generally better resists at a distance. So this is going to be another one of those characters that is just really weak to strike and to close range damage, but she's really made well to deal with other types of damages, and resistances overall are quite good. She's also our first curse resistance character just natively, and she also has silence resistance, which would absolutely shut her down as well. This is probably like the best two sets of status resistances that I've seen on a single character. It couldn't get more appropriate and important for her character type than that. Subjobs are Kodadama Wielder and Sword Sorcerer. I'm not really going to be talking about either of those in this video, but you might remember Sword Sorcerer from Summer Resnick, and I would be expecting that she gets a pretty similar spread here. But also, like Summer Resnick, you know, slash penetration isn't going to be a big deal for her. She is a damage dealer, but she has a lot of ways of penetrating magic. She's just really good at penetrating magic resistances and things like that. So trying to push her down the slash attack resistance penetration route and trying to get her slashing moves to do more damage feels like a bit of a loss, but on the right team that could be helpful for chaining. Kodadama Wielder came out with Sakura back in year 1, so I'm not really expecting much out of that sub-job. There is a large area of effect, close range, guaranteed hit skill in there, which could be cool for her. I'm not sure that she got it though. For master ability, she gets debuff weakening, crit rate up, and single target resistance. She also gets an effect that says when she has magic distance resistance, isn't that fun to say, it will increase her chance of landing immobilize. Moving into the LB, this is going to break magic barriers, extra large damage to 2 targets. This is going to be a destroyer. Much like this LB really reminds me a lot of Ashen Mont, and a lot of her, just in general, she feels like Ashen Mont, but on the magical side. Before dealing damage, this will also remove magic damage reductions. There are a lot of characters now that are getting like 10, 20 base magic attack resistance, and this is going to help deal with some of those things. She has a preemptive counter, 70% chance to counter slash and strikes. That's going to make her good into physical compositions. It's also helpful because, again, she is weak to strike, so this gives her a very reliable way of dealing with strike damage at a pretty long range. Strike units are not good at dealing with magic damage typically. So, with this being a preemptive counter, it feels like there's a pretty good chance that if you do run into a long-range attack from a strike unit, she has a lot of ways of dealing with long-range damage, or even a shorter range, while she's not going to be able to resist it, she does have a pretty good chance of taking the character out before they deal damage, which is, I think, something that people missed when they saw this character initially. Maybe because some of the content creators that were looking at her don't more typically play strike teams, but, you know, just judging by my own, I think I would have a lot of problem with that counter. And given that that is her major weakness, at least in terms of resistances, and her resistances are, other than that, generally quite good, I think it's really good for her. And of course, Slash being the most dominant attack type in the game, even she has slashing attacks, really helpful here. Her first main passive is going to be AoE resistance, magic, accuracy, and magic resistance penetration. So this is a combination of like ensuring damage, increasing penetration, and increasing defense. It's a really well-rounded, not exactly what I expected for a DPS, but she's going to have a lot of other ways of increasing her damage, so don't even worry about it. And then for the passive ability too, I believe this is AoE with resistance, like the wider damage attack resistance, and debuff resistance, or debuff weakening. Moving into her main sub-job, before we get into her main kit, she has a plus-shaped 2-hit skill that will inflict slow, and she also has a skill that will heal herself and others, while herself and one other. So really like double recover with Renoa, but it's also going to give them AP. She's not really a healing character. I think having this in her back pocket is pretty cool. Again, you might want to be running Sword Sorcerer with her, but I think this is interesting. I do not think that this is a bad main sub job, unless Sword Sorcerer on her happens to be really good. I think there's a good case for using this. And at this point, I think I've successfully used salt and thyme to drive a lot of the water off of my onions. So now we're going to start getting color. They are limp little noodles, but they're getting a nice golden color already. Anyways, with that being said, let's move on to the main job. First skill is going to be a 2-target skill that gives her magic up. It gives her HP on KO. It's very short range. This is kind of her basic attack. And all things considered, it's a pretty good basic attack. I love 2-target basic attacks. Very strong. She has a buff for herself. This is a really key skill for her, by the way. This is one that she really needs. It does a lot of things to her and to her kit. It's going to lower bravery on hit. It's going to decrease distance damage. And if you remember, this is going to increase her chance to immobilize people, so that's very important. And while she has this distance damage down, in addition to getting a better chance of proccing Immobilize, she's also going to get Absorb HP, which is going to be huge for her as well. So she really wants to have those distance-based damage reductions. It's really going to turn her whole kit on. But also, lowering bravery on hit isn't bad. It is just like a general reduction in power for your opponent. It's not something I think that there are a lot of resistances to. Other than the very general resistances, there's not a lot of interaction with it. So it can be pretty powerful. Just don't expect it to do a whole lot. It is nice. It's kind of hard to say what it does, because it does so many things. It'll increase the damage that they take, it'll decrease the damage that they do, it'll decrease the chances of their counters going off. So there's a lot of little things it does. It's just probably not going to do them super effectively like other ways could. Just say, pretty good. Her buddy buff is going to boost physical and magical damage for allies. It's going to give her a 7,500 HP shield for physical damage. That amount is what I assume. It may actually be higher, but I don't think it is. And if it is, you're probably going to see it proc in this video, because since I don't have wotv calc to show you in the background, I'm going to be finding some streamers throwing up some video of her. So you'll be able to kind of correct some of these things just by watching the video. It is also going to give her a follow-up hit, which is big for her. Magically based follow-up hit. It's going to do a lot of damage. It's going to really ramp her damage up. It's going to... Oh, man. These onions are starting to get sizzly now that there's not so much water left. This might be a good time for me to slow the cooking process down just a little bit and add some really interesting flavors, also potentially unlocking some flavors in my food by throwing in some white wine. That's obviously going to cook off. My onions aren't going to be alcoholic, but this will help me break up some things that are some crusts and stuff that are forming on the bottom of the pan. That is delicious, delicious flavor, and it's exactly the kind of thing I want in these onions. It's also probably going to reduce down to leave, since I'm using white wine, kind of a sweet and tangy flavor in the onions. And this is rapidly becoming a cooking video. Let me get back to Shurecca's kit, because we've only got 2 more skills. We're almost done talking about her kit. She has a skill that is going to do non-elemental damage. Pretty high non-elemental damage as well, so she'll be able to get around wind resistance pretty effectively. It's also going to reduce magic attack resistance before dealing damage, so that's pretty helpful for her as well. This is going to be a hard one to counterplay. Also, just in case you have a way of removing the honeycomb style barrier from her, and she loses her HP draining, this skill itself has HP drain for hit. This is similar to Elda, King of the Lions, or more recently, One Wing Sephiroth. They aren't necessarily HP drain characters, but because they can do a lot of damage with big skills that have HP drain themselves, they can heal themselves pretty effectively as well. So this is a really good backup plan for her. I really like it. Final skill here, 2 targets, very long range. So this is one of the more powerful parts of her kit, in my opinion. Single target penetration up. I believe she's the first character to get single target penetration. I don't think there are any current characters other than her who have a way of getting single target penetration that I know of at this moment, even on the JP side, so that's going to be pretty cool for her. This is going to be another large damage attack. It will also have high accuracy. So, there's not really guaranteed hits in this kit. Yeah. But she does have good base accuracy. She does have a passive that increases that accuracy. A high accuracy skill could be pretty cool for her. Even more interestingly though, new thing for this skill, it's going to do more damage the farther away she is from the target. She's also going to potentially inflict Immobilize with this skill. So this can stop people from getting in her range. And getting anywhere near her to attack her, while also keeping her damage towards them with this skill at its maximum. This is just really strong. And while she didn't necessarily catch on right away in JP, as we look at her usage, it has definitely picked up over time. I think people might have been a little bit cautious about her at first, but she has definitely become one of the most popular and iconic units on the JP side, along with Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker. And really, this is the first character that I would say is really meta-defining that's been released since Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker. So, this is definitely one that I hope you've been saving for, because she's coming up soon. You don't have much time left. Before I move into Shurecca's teams, let me tell you how I'm going to finish off these onions, since somehow this became a cooking video in the middle. I'm going to throw in a glug of balsamic vinegar and a couple of glugs of Worcestershire sauce. I'm going to let that cook in a little bit. That's going to add a bunch of umami and caramelized flavors that are really just going to amplify everything that's good about caramelized onions. And then, once you're starting to get to a color that you like, a nice brownness, but you're not quite there, you want to add some table sugar as well. I might be able to go with a little more, actually. Now you want to do this right before you're done cooking. You're going to let those sugars caramelize a little bit. Now, caramelized onions are already delicious because of their own natural sugars caramelizing, but this, much like the other additives, is really just going to amp up all of those umami, caramelized, Maillard, and savory reactions that are happening here, and just absolutely going to make this an amazing condiment and or topping for anything. Really anything. With the onions done and my whole house perfumed in their delicious goodness, let's talk about some teams for this girl. First of all, key partners. One key theme that you're going to see here that's especially dominant on the defensive side, but almost just as dominant on the offensive side, is that for whatever reason, this girl seems to need a healer to do really well. I completely do not understand why this is the case. It absolutely makes no sense to me, except to say that I didn't see any courage or re-raise in her kit, so this is kind of similar to Cypher. She needs a backup plan, and I think Luciel provides that pretty well. I think for Summer Resnick, though, it's more the Curse Resistance aura, and I think it's really these two things instead of really needing a healer. In fact, Luciel's heals are a little bit healing in advance, which is something that can really benefit her by giving her a backup plan, because she's already got a really good healing plan from her kit as is. So in some ways, I don't think these are necessarily here because they're healers specifically, but pairing her with one of these two healing characters is really important for her. Also, what is probably important to note here is that of the trifecta of modern healers that we've just recently gotten, the one that I didn't really see any strong correlation with was Lotus Mage Fina. Yes, there are people using this character on their teams, and it seems to work okay, but I didn't find any standout examples, and I didn't find a lot of people doing it either, so I really don't think that partnership is quite working out for Fina, unfortunately. Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker is a big deal for her because he can stack his follow-up hit with hers, and she has the kind of range that his follow-up hits are really going to want. So I think that this is probably the most potent 1-2-3 hit combo kind of thing, where she slaps the living shit out of somebody with one of her very powerful attacks, follows it up with her own follow-up hit that's non-elemental, and then it's followed up by Gilgamesh's follow-up hit, and potentially both Shurecca and Gilgamesh are healing off of their follow-ups and her initial attack. So like, it's just, there's re-raise, courage, all the resistances in the world. There's not a lot of things that really deal with this combo very well, and it's really just that it pumps out damage way faster than anyone is ready for or can deal with. There are other ways of doing this though, because neither of these characters are the only ones with these type of follow-up hits. I just haven't seen any of the other ones get really popular. I mean, I guess there is a certain precedent for Bartz and Ashen King Mont that might be able to do a very similar thing, and in fact, why am I not running this? This seems like a really incredible combo because it's just managing to overwhelm pretty much anybody, because people heal back really well now, but if you can apply so much damage in like one hit that they can't resist it in any ways, and follow-up hits are already good against re-raise and courage as well, so when you combine this with a really powerful DPS, it just overwhelms literally anybody in the game right now, even before certain things like threshold abilities can even proc, because those aren't going to proc until all of the damage has resolved. So even if you have a threshold heal and courage like June the Spring Celestial, that threshold heal isn't going to get a chance to trigger if she can bring you down, at least with her follow-up hit to courage, and then Gilgamesh's follow-up after that can remove the courage. You'll never have a chance for that threshold heal to actually proc. So this can even work really well against June the Spring Celestial, and man, I've devoted a lot of headspace to why Gilgamesh is on here, but at the same time, and while he's a really popular character, he doesn't even rank on offense, although he does come in second on defense. I'm just saying, this is a really powerful theoretical combo, and I've seen it wreck the shit out of some people's faces, but even that may not be the most important thing for her. Another thing that's really important for her that's going to be really strong is job-based synergies as well, and the strongest of these is Strategist Oldoa. Once again, not having re-raise or courage and kind of being a back row character, having a good tank on your team, especially one that can share vision cards with Shurecca, is a kind of a big deal and works out really well for her. And our most dominant team here has also featured Strategist Oldoa, so she's just a really good strategic choice with Shurecca. And then, much like Gilgamesh, the Scourgebreaker, if you want more DPS for this team because, you know, going overwhelming damage is ridiculously easy with Shurecca, you could either include One Wing Sephiroth or Helena the Black Rose. One Wing Sephiroth is just powerful and brings Curse into this, which can make the HP gains a little bit more asymmetrical. That could be good for you, Curse. We're really in a Curse, anti-Curse, healing, anti-healing meta right now, really. But Helena the Black Rose could just dump in more damage while still being able to work with those job-based vision cards. Looking at offense and defense now, I want to point out that Strategist Oldoa and Summer Resnick is the most powerful team on both. It's not the most used team though. I want to point something out here in my general list before I forget about it and go on. This team is obviously best of both worlds. Best, just clear, distinct advantages over every other team, obviously the best thing. I'm really kind of amazed that it's taken this long for the tank healer DPS to finally become back into fashion, but it's not in fashion. The ninth most used team here right now, if we were to look at today's rankings for JP, this is actually the most used team on the JP side. The reason that it's in ninth place is that for the first 3 days that I was testing, no one was using it. So I kind of had to average the data in between, and when you factor out those 3 days, these three fall off a lot. But while this team is the number one on the JP side right now, I just want to point out how niche this other team is. Like, it definitely deserves to be in third place. So I need Oldoa and Resnick. And it's going to be really easy to tell because Resnick is going to show up in this last slot, but for most Shurecca teams, it's going to be Shurecca. So we see our first Resnick team here. And then moving over, we see our second Resnick team with Gilgamesh. Pretty good team. Not bad, but not good enough to rank, really. And then we got to go all the way to page 7 to pick up this team, which is getting 4.8 stars. See how long it takes over here. Nope, that's the Gilgamesh team. Wait, was that it? Yes. Okay, 2.2 stars, 4.8. Both of those are incredibly good scores. This team is just the tops. This is just really good. Although again, I rank them low in usage, both, because I really have very low data for them. So some of the conclusions about them may not be as statistically valid as for some of the other teams. But the second most powerful team on offense was actually Veritas of the Winds and Dario the Crystalborn. And this isn't like a new thing either. This has been pretty much the whole time Shurecca's been out. This has been a very powerful offensive team. It ends up being my last ranked team. This is in number 10 because it just does abysmally bad. It's very easy to predict and to counterplay on defense, but on offense, this just drills through Earth-based teams, I would imagine, just incredibly well. But it is worth noting for this team especially that there is the new Veritas equipment that's coming out, and that I would imagine without the forewarning that I gave you as global players, JP players just aren't going to have this built for a little while. And once that is built and equipped onto Veritas of the Winds, he's going to become a lot more dominant of a character, and this might actually push the value of this team and other teams like it way into the stratosphere, to the point where we may start to see a little bit of a Veritas meta. Maybe not the Veritas being the very best things in the game, but to where we at least see them on elemental or job-based teams that make sense for them, because they are powerful enough to really hang with characters now. Third place on offense is Strategist Oldoa and One Wing Sephiroth, so combining a lot of the kind of ideal stuff here. One Wing Sephiroth and Luciel, but also Helena the Black Rose and Luciel, which is going to be, I believe, a full staff team. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that 3 out of 5 of these teams have either Summer Resnick or Luciel as a healer. So again, healers are important. Looking at defense, we're actually going to see that the top 4 out of 5 all run either Summer Resnick or Luciel. Second place is going to be Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker and Luciel. One Wing Sephiroth and Summer Resnick. This is our other new team, and the one that's incredibly popular on the JP side with Summer Resnick's release. This is going to come in 3rd place on defense, while it didn't actually rank on offense at all. It's not a bad team, but it's probably not as This is kind of the meme team here, right? Like, it's good at doing a thing, it works well on defense, but it's not the best variation. And the reason that this works so well on defense is because you can put Shurecca up front, bait in Gilgamesh or all these ice teams to try to deal with your wind team, and now you have 2 incredibly competent fire units right here on the back row that can just wipe them out. It's really good, it's a bait team, and I think that's why it's doing so well. Helena the Black Rose and Luciel. This is going to be a staff-based combo, so another one that you can probably get your staff job VCs working in on. And then finally on defense, we have Strategist Oldo and One Wing Sephiroth. So again, you know, Strategist Oldo is showing up on 2 teams on offense and defense, being important on both. Interestingly, seemingly being more important on offense even. Okay, so once again, I've managed to pull the best potential team out of absolute obscurity. Again, page 7 of the modern rankings for JP, I found Strategist Oldoa, Summer Resnick, and Shurecca absolutely dominating on both sides. Like, they're, you know, the next best score for offense is 4.4 on average. Somewhere, oh yeah, way down here at the bottom. That was Dario. The next best thing isn't even above 2. This was the only one to rank above 2 on defense. That's always really powerful. And it looks like this is going to be a very good character. I'm just saying. And this team also looking good. The data in general is looking pretty good for them. Second place on defense, Gilgamesh Scourgebreaker and Luciel. Still above 4 on offense and getting really close to being at 2 stars on defense. Definitely a strong team on defense. Then we have one that was pretty well rounded in both cases, Luciel and Helena the Black Rose. This is pretty good on both sides. Again, a little bit stronger on offense, a little bit weaker on defense. I think it's a slightly weaker team and setup. And that's really impressive because the thing that changes here is Helena versus Gilgamesh and VC strategy. Your VC synergy is much stronger for this team. But you would think that since Gilgamesh, especially with his combination with Shurecca, is so much more powerful than Helena the Black Rose, you would think that would account for a lot. But really, the VC strategy synergy here is putting in a lot of legwork. And that's why a lot of people kind of discounted this team. And they still discount, like, this team has actually fallen even lower to the point where right now it's like the 10th most liked team, despite it just being all around good. I really think people should be trying to use this team more if they have the characters that make it work. Strategist Oldoa, One Wing Sephiroth, this was also an incredibly well-rounded team. It was way stronger on offense, but also a bit weaker on defense, so this is more offensively oriented, but also really well-balanced and not super well-used either. This wasn't one of the teams I had to go the farthest back into the rankings to get, but the top 4 to top 6 were pretty solid here. So, well, actually, this isn't really... The top 4 and top 5 were really solid here, so this was really where you started falling back into the more obscure teams. And out of the teams I've shown you so far as being the best performers, only one of them is commonly used, and that's Gilgamesh and Luciel. Even less used, though... Well, actually, again, this is technically the number 1. Like, today in JP... How did I do that? Today in JP, this is actually the first most used team. I still think this is still like the 10th most used team, no matter how you look at it. But this could potentially be the first if I just thought about this differently. It does very well on defense, as you can see. Pretty good defensive score. This is pretty damn close to being second place too. Not very far off. But what you can see here is that the offense really falls off. In fact, this is the first team that we're seeing that has an offensive score that's less than 4 on average. And that's not good. The thing that's really holding up here is the defensive score. I'd still say this is a good team for defense, but I don't think as many people should be using it on offense as they are. Then again, this still could be your best team, so whatever. One Wing Sephiroth, Luciel, and Shurecca. This is a very well-used team, always has been. It's fallen a little bit out of favor again because of teams like this one. Basically just supporting my hypothesis that largely Summer Resnick is replacing Luciel on these teams by having a better way of dealing with Curse and still having a lot of the same healing properties. Yeah, this is a pretty strong combination of characters, but as you'll see, it is way more popular than it deserves to be. But even more popular and less deserving is One Wing Sephiroth and Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker. This is pretty much just 3 DPSs on a team, and while it does have overwhelming power, it actually manages not to rank above 4 on offense. While it does have a fairly, and maybe even surprisingly, good defensive record, I just don't think that this is a good strategic alignment of characters. It's just all DPS, power, power, power. And while that's definitely been the way of things for a while, especially with the Greatsword meta, which is, there aren't Greatsword healers. I'm sure there are, but there aren't even that many Greatsword tanks necessarily, you know? Like, even though, like, realistically, the Greatsword is really only a defensive weapon. At least looking at like medieval history, like it's a sharpened shield essentially, especially when we're looking at fucking swords like clouds. But this is fantasy. This is Final Fantasy, so you know that's possible. But I really think that we finally hit the point of saturation where teams like this, while they are still good, are falling to teams like this that have the more standard tank healer DPS combinations, because finally now we have modern examples of all 3. And that's just always been good for balancing things out. Now, in War of the Visions, it really depends on what's viable at the moment, and there's been a lot of reasons why healers haven't been preferred, but I mean, you can't argue with the numbers, can you? Dario the Crystalborn shows up again. This team is pretty popular. One Wing Sephiroth. This is essentially like, I'm running this team right now with old Sephiroth instead of Dario as a Katana team. But you can fit Black Mage onto Katana pretty well because of previous Dark synergies, the synergies that were made to build up teams like Black Mages, like Dark Fina with the original Sephiroth. You know, there's a long history of some of the first job-based vision cards that were, you know, kind of dark focused from a design standpoint. At that point, the way you did that was with like synergies between Mace, Katana, and Black Mage. So these two, she slots in pretty well to some of the job-based teams for this. It's well used, but it's not the most powerful team, and I think that's because you might be stretching that synergy just a little bit while not adding a lot to it. The 4th most used team, at least historically, the staff-based team, has a really strong job-based synergy, but it also tends to fall apart a lot more on offense. In fact, this was one of the weakest ranking offensive teams other than this combination, which also did pretty poorly. That being said, it holds together pretty well, and I don't think any of these teams are particularly bad. Shurecca is an amazing unit, and she's going to hold up all of these teams quite well. But in terms of what you could have if you had this general unit pool, it's not the best configuration, even though it is a quite popular one. And then finally we get to the 10th place team, and this is one that's not very well used, but also when you look at it on average, it's not the best team on the list by any means. And this is Veritas of the Winds and Dario the Crystalborn. Now, on the other hand, this is 2nd place in offense by a pretty considerable amount. It's the only thing that really comes close to Strategist Oldoa and Summer Resnick. Very powerful team when you get to pick your opponent with a relative degree of certainty. But when your opponent gets to pick you, especially in a meta that contains Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker, an incredibly powerful next level ice unit that can just rip through these three fools like it's nothing, well, you tend to have a lot more problems on defense, and this was by far the worst defensive performance we saw of anything. Really, being second place on offense, it was the defense that drugged this team all the way down to 10th in terms of performance. That being said, especially if you're building Dario the Crystalborn right now and Veritas of the Winds is basically a free unit, this could be one of the more accessible ways to build Shurecca, and it is at the very least going to be incredible on offense. So I'd say this team is still a winner despite it being the loser of the group in 10th place. So with all that being said, thank you so much for watching this overly detailed analysis of a character that doesn't have a lack doesn't really have that great of information accessibility online. So maybe this is one of the first times you're coming to the channel because you couldn't find it on wotv. You wanted to hear what I had to say about the character, and maybe you liked what you saw. I mean, you watched till the end, you saw what I think is a pretty unique form of content right here, the real comparative analysis of how teams are actually doing when they put the numbers up. Like, this is a really good way of measuring teams. I would say that this performance is even more indicative because it's over a multi-battle format, really pressing how far a team can go, because you can barely win arena and still win. But if you can win in guild battle and do really well, that's winning 2 fights in a row on one team, and that's far more impressive. So I think this is the best test of units, especially for PvP, that exists in War of the Visions. And if you agree, you should hit that subscribe button, maybe even ring the bell, because you want this content coming to you before the characters come out, and I can make that happen for you. So thank you so much for watching. You can also like this video. Thank you very much for doing so. I hope I don't have to remind you, but I know I watch YouTube kind of passively sometimes, and like I have to hear somebody say like this video before I'm like, oh yeah, that is a thing that I should do on this platform. I did like this video. I am watching till the end. They've been rambling for a while and I'm still here. Yeah, I definitely like this video. But also, while you're on the way down to the comment section, because you should definitely leave a comment too, I would love to hear from you and hear what your opinions are. Hit that link in the description that's going to take you to the Yggdrasil-like link tree of the Jackie Fox Media universe, which is going to show you all the points and constellations out there on the larger interweb where you can find my content. Things like podcasts, other YouTube channels that talk about just general life and stuff like that, economics, politics, whatever. But also I sell books, and you can donate to the channel as well. All those options will be available to you through the Linktree link in the description, so check that out before you click off this video. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.